Oh, and here we are. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Today is Wednesday, December 14th, and this is the 5 o'clock Finance Committee meeting of the Scarborough Town Council. I'll call this meeting to order and show that our newly formed committee is all present, Councilors Hamel, Shoup, and myself. First order of business is the approval of minutes from August 16th. As none of us were on the committee at the time, I shared them with Councilors Anderson and Seither, who both were, and they were both fine with them. So
Thank you.
okay, and they were very detailed as well. Does anybody have any questions or adjustments to the agenda? The only adjustment that came forward was from Councilor Seither. Actually, I think the adjournment, it showed it was unanimous with 3 votes, and I believe it was unanimous with 2 votes. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Yes.
Motion passes, minutes are approved. There's no action items for this meeting. I really called it to get us together and get familiar with each other and kind of set the basis for how we'll work through the year and provide opportunity to answer questions that anybody might have. First item was to establish a regular meeting schedule. And I understand that we're all not going to be familiar with what our schedules are for next year quite yet. It looked like we could pencil in the second Wednesday of the month at 5. There seemed to be some consensus around that, subject to change, right? So we might revisit that next month. But for now, we'll pencil those into the calendar. And if we need to adjust, I'm totally open to it. I think Don and I are reasonably flexible as well. So that's the easiest part. The Finance Committee priorities for the coming year. I wanted everybody to have an opportunity to weigh in. Are there particular areas of focus or concern? It's a big pond out there and we can't do everything, but if we can create some focus and alignment on the things that we'd like to understand better or tackle, I think our chances for success will be improved. So I don't want to start, but I will if I have to. I suspect that Don came with something.
Yeah,
Right.
it's interesting because we had a conversation, just a few minutes ago about town council goals and our plans to meet in January to do that. So generally, and I've shared this with John as well, that I thought the stuff that he was pointing to and the ideas he had in terms of what were priority areas were great. And I suggested it would just be an opportunity for us to reinforce those with the upcoming, overall council discussion on that. So, but some of those things included capital planning was top of the list. What do we do in terms of a long-term capital plan? Recently we had done some things around, being careful about large expenditures. In some years, in fact, we made a commitment of no large capital expenditures that year. But so I think that those things are very similar to what I think John had outlined. So my only appeal, really netting it all out, is to keep it loosely framed enough so that we can make sure it's completely aligned with what we're going to do together in January.
So I heard capital. And we're going to have some goals that come out of at the council level. So things are going to get pushed to us as well. This is our opportunity to push uphill. I've heard you talk about capital as well. Is that an area of interest or focus?
I think it is. I think it was more kind of in response to, I think generally I was hearing, how did we get to the situation with the school? And I said, I think some of the feedback I was getting, well, you can sometimes maybe get ahead of that with better capital planning, not better, but maybe more detailed. Not sure if that's exactly what solves that, or if that's the avenue that you would do in those type of situations. But, especially with us exploding the way we are, it would probably be good to try to prioritize. I know, like I was looking at, I know the town council's priority last year was the community center. And it seems like there's consensus behind that. But I also know that there's other things going on, that's wants and needs and things like that.
It's complicated. So capital planning, there's room. I think there's room for improvement. Not to say that there's a ton wrong with what we do, but I think there's very little understanding of what we do. And I think just creating that common ground would go a long ways. So I can hop on that bandwagon. And I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I suspect it might, some of our first few meetings, maybe that's what we'll try to focus on, is understanding, what's the project life cycle, right? From the time it gets improved to when the money gets spent, to when the bonds get issued, and what controls are in place, and are those sufficient? Just understand them a little bit better, especially with some of the bigger things coming down the pike. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, and Tom will love this. How do you plan for your big projects? They're all kind of unique. There might be a better way to do it, though. Or I'm certainly open to trying.
There may be some debt modeling systems that's related to capital advance for the health benefit.
I think that's a good point. So I didn't have this as a priority, but one of the guiding, I guess, principles I want to try to use this year is we did do some debt modeling last year, and there were some basic assumptions that went into that, related to growth and how much, our spending will go up, how much our revenue go up. I'd like to try to track to those this year to see how far off we are. And I think that will also help to give some confidence, or not.
Well, it might start with a check-in on those assumptions and a modification. I think those were done largely by John and myself and some other staff input, but it'd be great to have a detailed conversation. Is this the right assumption? Because, those assumptions really matter in terms of how that model produces.
That is the type of thing that I think a committee like this could inform very well.
There's no right answer. It's really about getting as many opinions as you can to make that model as good as it can be.
And there's some things in reality that have come forward since we did that as well. Like the school now has come out with when they expect to spend the money, which is an important input. The library got defeated. That's still out there. How do we want to, adjust things for that? And honestly, the estimates for the community center were very green. And I don't know that we have a better estimate now anyways, but those are the types of things that, as we go on through the year, we could work through.
Yeah, there was, as Don alluded to in leadership, we just had a discussion around this. I mean, there's multiple ways that you could do the modeling such as an exercise to identify what our capacity and abilities are without defining projects. Or you could do it, load in a project or certain projects at somewhere and see what's left, and then help that define what and when you could take on beyond that. I hope the council will use this year to really do the work and provide some leadership to the community in terms of where the priorities are, particularly in those big capital items. I think there needs to be some alignment around that, and other things should fall in place behind. But right now we're kind of circling, it seems.
Yeah, we're stuck in a chicken egg.
I agree with everything that's been said. One thing that I think we should also take a moment to, take a deep breath and also give ourselves some credit for, and that is we have had, I think, a very good track record in recent years of predicting outcomes financially, using the target of, no greater than a 3% mill rate increase, some other metrics like that. It's been very well established, long before this council or the past couple of councils. So I think we've demonstrated we have an ability to hit targets. The only thing I would ask is, a chance for us to kind of revisit those, to perhaps reconfirm them or revalidate them and see if they, are they the right ones, or can we, try to reframe and try to ask some broader questions about some assumptions, that we've made, particularly around growth. So I think I don't have an answer there or even a goal, but I think if we went through that process as a team, and as a staff and as a community, I think it'd be very healthy.
So you jumped ahead on me, which
Sorry.
I think was
I have a
appropriate.
bad
So
habit.
in terms of this is just a list of the goals from last year that were adopted by the council. And I left ones that clearly were not related to finance out. I'd say number 1 and 4 are not clearly related to finance, but there might be some impacts on us. But the ones that really came out of finance and finance committee track to were the fiscal health and sustainability metrics. And this less than 3% mill rate increase has been target of the council for as long as I've been around, and I think quite a bit longer than that. One thing I would say that I've tossed around is we've been somewhat under 3% for at least 3 or 4 of the past 5 years. And if we are tracking to be able to afford some of these larger expenditures, I think sticking as close to 3% as possible is going to be important. That's how you avoid a big spike down the road as you try to inch your way towards it. So maybe, tightening that a little bit so that instead of less than, it's as close as possible to 3. And if we don't spend the money on projects, we put it into savings for the future. The 5% gross budget increase was a new metric last year. It was loosely defined or wasn't very well defined. We wound up applying it at the overall spending, the top level. I think we can refine it a little bit to put some definition around what we mean by a gross budget or gross expenditure. I still like the 5% amount.
I'd just like to add, I agree. I think we should have a kind of a target on cost increases, but again, I think we should try to, firm that up with, should we use CPI? Should we use the employment cost index? What are some of the other factors we might take into account to verify whatever that gross budget increase number will be? So I know this is
So that's another layer we could put on it.
yeah. So
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think inflationary impacts are going to be felt much greater next year than we've seen historically.
Yeah.
So
and we've had
5%
good
is going to
success.
be a challenge, I suspect.
And we've had, I think, really good success with that in terms of negotiating labor contracts. I know something that Liam Gallagher introduced, switching from CPI to employment cost index. There were others, but to Tom's point, given that we're in an environment that is not typical, in terms of what's happened with costs and a lot of other financial.
Yeah, at some point, inflation has to affect our spending as well, right? If inflation's been 7 to 10% this year, and we're only allowing for a 3% mill rate increase, at some point, something's got to come to a head. I expect it will, maybe not this year, but in the near future. So they're not so much directives for Tom, for what he brings to us, as guidelines or metrics that we can use to understand what's being proposed and whether what we anticipate to happen is tracking true or not. And then we can adjust our long-term plans based on it and our short-term budget objectives as well. The 15% debt service is a percent of operating budget. I think we can do better on this one. It was introduced for the first time last year. It's sound, it's based on good reason, but it's difficult to measure from a budget perspective, because debt service today relates to projects that happened in the past, right? And the new projects that we allow this year really don't affect your debt service this year. They'll affect it in the future. So I think it's a good target. We do over the long term want to track to that, but there may be a way to phrase it in terms of what we spend on debt service and appropriating capital or capital reserves in a given calendar year. So maybe that 15% of our budget or 13 debt service and appropriated capital and reserves shouldn't exceed 15% for this year. It's a more tangible way of tracking to it. And the long run is important too. But so I don't know if I'm speaking Greek with this stuff.
I'm not Googling things right now.
No. So we can spend time to dive into these. I think that's important. Would be good for everybody to understand the metrics a little bit better. Optimizing utilization of tax increment financing districts. We've done a good job last year of increasing what we capture, which is the amount of tax dollars that get sheltered from state funding formulas, whether it be for revenue sharing or for school funding and for county taxes. So we increased our utilization to 100%. So we maximize it. I think it's a good goal to keep though, because we have some growth that is in the pipeline that is currently outside of our TIF districts that makes sense to capture that if it saves us about 60 cents on the dollar. And then you can also use those proceeds for allowable projects. I think in the next couple of years, it'll be an interesting thing for us to continue pursuing. Make sure that we have the map drawn right, and then that we we use it where we can. And this is something else. It was probably 2 years were spent on talking about tax increment financing. I expect it will be Greek to most people right now. But I think that we've got some resources that we can point back to and dive in a little bit when things come up that relate to that. In terms of these metrics for the council level session, do you see any? I mean, maybe make some refinements, but as a basis, do you think it's a good place to start? Okay. I'm gonna just, yeah, okay. All right.
One thing I would say though is, this ties back to assumptions a little bit is, do we, really know what happens with our model in a downturn? Say if we were going to have, hopefully this is not going to be the case. And I know there's a lot of speculation about, is it going to be a short downturn or a sharp recovery or whatever? But
Why don't we scenario test it?
yeah, what can we do? Like a
Come up
best
with
case,
what ifs.
best case, worst
What if
case.
this happens
yeah.
and let's try to that's the whole point of it.
I think that would be very helpful. I also think that just generally raising our game in terms of financial literacy as a council, I think would be a very, very good thing. And I look back over the past several years, I mean, we had a nice collection of these past several years of budget books. And I have noticed the past several years, we haven't really been getting into a level of detail that we had at one time. So I just hope that generally in the spirit of our raising that, the financial literacy and comfort level of our, of our council on average, I think it'd be very good for us to be comfortable with key numbers and to know, be able to know what our key factors are, cost and investment opportunities are. So,
Simplify things.
yeah. I mean, a couple of key measures like, what's the percentage of our debt versus our operating budget, those kinds of things. I know that a lot of them don't apply, in a municipal setting, but there's a municipal version of these. Making sure our folks are kind of comfortable with that, size of our budget and, what our staff levels look like, those kinds of things. So, and I think the idea, the opportunity is getting down on the weeds a little bit, but the opportunity of us getting into, perhaps some, large department level reviews in terms of, the past year's experience has been, and then what the projected, the future year, the next year's budget's going to look like.
So I think
Sorry,
boiling things
wait.
down. So we've got a fiscal policy, right?
Yes.
That you need 5 degrees and then some to try to read, let alone
It's
understand.
dense.
We, as counselors, you're never going to have that depth. But if we can make things, come up with some core metrics that, hey, you know what, you're in charge of this organization, you should probably, be tracking to these 2 or 3 things. And if things get out of whack, then you should probably dig deeper. Boy, if we could get there, I think that would be a huge accomplishment.
And you've got it here, I think, the frame of a scorecard or of a dashboard. I know we use different terms for it, but so what's it look like? And I know we don't do monthly reviews, but quarterly reviews, or at least the key reviews, the year interviews and that sort of thing would be good for people to, know the high level. I know we do these in the budget books in various ways, but I think just getting more comfortable with that and more conversant in that as a council generally would be very good.
I've got one more. We spend an awful lot of time reviewing budgets in excruciating detail. I would like to see a pivot to reviewing spending in excruciating detail and maybe taking a little higher level approach to our review of the budget. That would require some staff assistance. And that's another thing I want to mention. We're going to be onboarding, Tom's going to be onboarding a new finance director in the next couple of weeks. So we have to be cognizant of that. I don't want to say we're going to be on our own. We're going to start to having good support, but we're mostly going to be on our own for the initial period, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that fair, Tom?
Yeah, I'd like to think that Norman's going to hit the ground running, but I think that's fair. Probably it'll take some time for him to get his feet on the ground and be in a position of offering maybe some suggestions in terms of changing practice and such. But he comes with a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I think he'll be a resource immediately.
Good.
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I realize we have staff limits in terms of bandwidth, capacity for ad hoc stuff. So I think we will hopefully be very careful about that.
We'll try to choose wisely.
Yeah.
Tom, anything from your perspective?
No, John, you and I have had the occasion to chat about, and I've heard your dismay, and not just yours, past finance committee members, the financial reports, both monthly and quarterly, that we prepare. Undoubtedly, there's a better way of packaging that information so it's more consumable and understandable. And so if that's, I know that's an area that you have some interest and perhaps expertise in. So maybe that's a reasonable goal for this committee to come up with a format that makes sense to you and to the public.
I would love to dive into that a little deeper. And that's when I was talking about really understanding where we spend money, that's what I'm referring to.
Fair enough. Okay.
It's, you can touch that. You can't touch a budget so much.
Yeah, we can give you all sorts of Munis reports, but it's going to provide you a lot of information that probably isn't all that meaningful and helpful,
It
frankly.
needs to be boiled up.
Right. Right.
And made useful.
And historically, we have struggled working with past elected officials and finance committees to kind of provide the information that's relevant and helpful. I'll be honest. I'm anxious to see if Norman can bring a different perspective in that regard and a bit of a breakthrough. The other thing that I shudder to even mention, but the past finance committee was just dipping their toe in the water of, not dipping toe, they kind of jumped both feet in, looking at revising the fiscal policy and whether that's an effort that you want to continue with. It's not for the faint of heart, but that work is undone, if you will.
So I guess my feeling on that is I don't know that I have the expertise to develop a fiscal financial policy. I have a decent background in the area. That might flow once we onboard an experienced finance director. I think that might flow naturally from that process.
Agreed. Good. So let's put a pin in that and we can consult with Norman as he gets more and more comfortable over the course of the
I like that
spring and
approach.
fall.
Done.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Tom, I'm pleased to hear Tom bring up the topic of fiscal policies first, and I agree, they're pretty dense. Okay, we talk about implementing them. I mean, they're really dense. So I would want to try to balance, not necessarily doing a complete redo, but let's try to understand what we were trying to accomplish with them in the first place, and get farther down the road with understanding and implementing them, rather than just scratching the whole thing and writing very high level model. And on one hand or on the other hand, it's just implementing whatever the hell is there and realizing it's way too overbuilt for what we're capable of doing.
So when I get to page 2 of a policy, my eyes start to go kind
So-
of blurry.
If that happens to you, that's probably a bad indicator for the rest of the council of the public. So
Right. So a lot of what's in our current policy is direction for staff, and it's monitored by staff, and it was put together predominantly by staff, I think. Yeah, I'm just not in a good position to if you want to repeal it, I've got an open ear there, but
right.
I don't know that that's the right action quite yet.
yeah,
either.
I'm all about us trying to get a better grasp on our financials, and I've been beating the drum about implementing fiscal policies. I'm not sure that's the way to get there. However, we did spend a fair amount of time talking about that when we were getting into debt with our with our bond advisor and that sort of thing over the summer. So I think that it's a good place to go.
Maybe some of that, when we dive into reporting, will be covered, because there are a number of metrics that are referenced in there and a lot of practices, but maybe we can tie together some of the loose ends there.
So, won't ask the new finance guy to do that in the first 90 days, right? So-
Well, I want him to meet the department heads and, establish himself a little bit and then meet us as well.
Sure.
Okay. Any members of the public that would like to comment on what we've talked about today? Would like to provide an opportunity? And go ahead.
Nothing directly to what you're addressing, other than with Mr. Hall sitting back to the public, it makes it difficult to hear him.
Okay.
I don't know procedurally, he'd be sitting on a microphone, it would be better for the.
He has a microphone. I don't know if it's on, but that's good feedback.
My voice sounds very loud in my own head, so I apologize for
I
that.
feel like he's yelling at me. Okay, thank you.
Another comment I would make, and I heard it mentioned earlier, the library seems to be becoming a continual topic of conversation. And I want to very much against that. The town just defeated that proposal very handily. It marks the second time that the library expansion was defeated. The library people, the board of trustees and the library lady in charge of the library spoke many times at this podium that said there was no plan B. This was the minimum that could be accepted by them. And, you know, they made many comments to that effect many times. I've been told they were encouraged to look at something different. And their response was, there was nothing different to look at. I think that library is and should be a dead issue and not a topic of conversation. I've been told that they're eager to restart a conversation, I guess, with you folks. And I think that's wrong. We've got other things in this town. And the school is the big one. And I advocated from the beginning that until I was against the library project, until we looked at and knew the financial consequences of everything, all the other major projects that were being talked about. That obviously went nowhere. I think the library should now be off the table as far as discussion. They live by the sword, die by the sword. They selected their way of wanting to bring their side of the story to the public, and the public spoke.
So I'd like to respond to that. I did support the library, but I fully recognize that the voters said no. And so the way procedurally this works, it's been on our capital plan for a while. It was on the capital plan this year. The town council does not have the authority to approve a project that big. They have to ask the voters. We asked the voters said no. Now it's no longer, from my perspective, on the capital plan. They're welcome to come back with another proposal. Next year, I guess my inkling or advice would be to see if you can meet as many of the needs as possible with some of the other projects that might be in the queue, whether it be a community center or the school, or even, public safety building has a pretty good meeting space. Maybe that could be utilized for some of the needs that were identified this year. But in terms of putting a project back before the voters, similar scale, similar concept, council as a whole can do what they choose to, but I'm not leaning in that direction right now. And I don't know if Don or Karen, you have thoughts.
John, I think you captured it perfectly. I share your thoughts precisely.
Anything else?
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. And I see that we're bumping up at 5:30 now. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting, and we can move into our next meeting as a finance and appointments trio. All those in favor of adjourning? Thank you.
Thanks, John. Nice start.
Thank you.
Going to convene A and C right in this, right here, might as well. Okay. Can I just have a moment just to get my other material?
It's 5:30. May have said 5:30 actually, yeah, so I think
We're tracking, we're pretty close to that.
can I take like a minute?
Yep.
All right.
It's your meeting.
So your next finance meeting will be January. typically?
It'll be January, looking at the second one in January. If that's too soon. I wanted to get some of this. Legwork stuff out of the way.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, good evening and welcome to the December 14th, 2022 Town Council Appointments Negotiations Committee meeting. I'm your chair, Karen Shoup, and I call this meeting to order. And at the meeting, it looks like we have Councilor Hamel and Councilor Pucci. So first, we're going to approve the minutes from the December 5th, 2022 meeting. Did everyone get a chance to review the minutes that Don prepared?
I apologize. I have not had a chance to review the meeting, the minutes as of yet. I also wasn't a member during the last meeting, but I was there.
I reviewed the minutes, and again, I was also not a member, but they seem very thorough and accurate.
Don, I assume that you're okay with
Yes,
them?
they're accurate representation of what I recall at the meeting. So yes, I recommend them for approval.
Do we have a motion?
It's a motion to approve.
All in favor? Or
Aye.
do we need a second? Sorry.
Just, yeah, I'll second that.
Yep.
And then I'm gonna
Discussion?
abstain just because I haven't actually read them yet.
Okay,
They
so
look incredibly thorough though, Don. This,
do you want to table the minutes? I don't, you tell me. If you want to table them, we can table them.
if you guys are ready to go, I'm okay. I don't suspect there's anything amiss with them.
I would say if we approve them now, but there are issues subsequent, we could do that. You could do it that way, or you could table it. It's your choice.
Motion's been offered. It's ready to move.
You're ready to approve. I believe Don motioned to approve and I seconded.
Okay, so
So-
all in favor?
So you can, yeah,
Mhm.
call the vote.
Okay,
And I'm just gonna abstain.
okay, thank you. Okay, so item 4,
Just a quick question, procedural question. When we're voting in committee, someone told me this applied to, and this is not to pick on you, John, but someone told me that you could vote in the affirmative or in the negative, but you could not abstain from a vote. Does that apply to committees as well?
It should, yes. If they have the chance to review a tape or review the minutes, then they should be able to vote.
So I asked that question not to muddy the waters, but what I would say is if we approve them, if there's a subsequent issue with the minutes, is there an opportunity for someone to go back and to revise them?
We'd have to bring it back to the committee to revise,
Mhm.
yes.
no, that's easy, I think.
So, just to clarify, we received these this afternoon and I was out running errands and other stuff going on. I haven't had a chance to read it.
Yeah,
They
this-
look very thorough.
No, it's not, I'm not putting pressure on you. I'm just saying that if we voted 2-1 to approve them. And then, but there was also the option to edit them later if that is necessary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so. Okay,
That
So
sounds,
I think you need to call the vote.
They,
You already have?
I think we
yeah,
voted,
we voted.
Don and I approved.
It was 2 in favor and 1 abstention or 1.
Or opposed, if you want to record it as opposed. I wasn't opposed, I just never read it. I haven't read the minute.
Okay, so item-
All I can say is I'm not going to do the minutes for this meeting. Okay, so.
is that the chair's responsibility? We'll establish that later. Okay. So item number 4 is considering appointments to fill the 2 vacant alternate positions on the planning board that have been vacant for a while. And then we also had a recent vacancy on the zoning board. So as I just said, actually me leaving planning board and becoming a counselor was one of the vacancies that became known, I think like in September. And then we had the other alternate on planning board resigned in like October. And I think I had mentioned that I know a couple of the planning board meetings have only had 4 people in attendance. And coming from there and zoning board with the quasi judicial, I thought it would be prudent for us to, considering we had such a good stack of applicants, to fill the 2 alternate positions. I know we have other reappointments that we have pending right now that we're not discussing tonight, that we will discuss at a later time. But we wanted to move forward with the 2 vacant positions on planning board and zoning board. And because I know we did get to have a conversation about the applications that we received. So did everyone get a chance to look at the applications for planning board that we had received?
Yes,
And I know that we got a new one that was included in our packet. I'm not seeing it. There it is.
I think the applications appear in your packet in the order they're listed on the summary sheet, if that's helpful.
that's correct.
That's okay.
And I did
that one
receive
right
and
there.
read the applicants.
Yes, yeah.
Clarify.
We got that. So, this is my first meeting. I'm not sure if I should just go ahead. And I know that we've all been through this, and I know that we discussed a couple different candidates last meeting, and I know that we've gotten some more applications. I don't know if members want to put forward who they think, if you guys are expecting me to first make the recommendation.
So it's funny, I know that Don isn't a fan of ranked choice voting, but I,
You are correct.
a non-confrontational way to bring this forward, maybe for us to write down on a piece of paper our top three. And if we have the same, we could do it through discussion, deliberation as well. But that is an option. The top vote getters get nominated.
I applaud Mr. Cloche for his ideas in terms of, how we would do this, but I'm not sure, that I'm comfortable making a decision about that, this evening. So, I mean, when he actually raised it earlier today, I wasn't sure if he was serious or not. So it's quite clear he is serious. So, but I don't know. I mean, I don't really, know how I feel about that, but, it's one way of doing it, but I'm not willing to commit to that now.
So talk me through, how would you normally do? Would we normally talk about all the applicants, or is that, is discussion kind of frowned upon and we just try to nominate somebody and vote?
I would say there is just a general discussion of the candidates.
Okay.
And then there's I can't really describe how the process works, but it is actually there seems to be a consensus that emerges, or at least somebody takes a position and makes a motion, and then you go from there. But generally, there's discussion, and then the motion seems to develop from that.
So I don't mind starting my perception of
Sure, thank you.
with the discussion. I think we're extremely lucky to have such quantity and quality of applicants right now. So it's a feast of riches. Some of them I know, some of them I don't. So I'm hoping that you guys can help fill in some of the gaps that I might have. Leroy Crockett, I don't know well, but we both ran and lost an election for school board together. So you bond going through that experience a little bit. Incredibly hard worker, incredibly involved and engaged in a number of areas of town. Joseph Doherty, I think has been in town for a while, recently settled here. Is also applying for the zoning board of appeals and the long range planning. Actually had something go before the zoning board of appeals in the past couple of years, so that he can convert his seasonal home to year round. So he's a permanent residence now. James Hubert is somebody that I'm not all that familiar with. Been on ZBA for a good while. Impressive resume, former chair. Ken Johnson, former town councilor. I'm obviously very familiar with. Noah Perlett is somebody that I think most of us know is on the Conservation Commission. Very qualified, teaches at UNE, very well schooled in conservation and sustainability issues. And Gwendolyn Simons, who was at the last meeting appointed to the Personnel Appeals Board, but really has an interesting background as I think a physical therapist and
Attorney.
yeah, an attorney with business acumen. So I look forward to good things from all of these people.
I know.
So I guess I don't think we can go wrong. And I don't know if it's appropriate for me to pick my top three before I give you guys a chance to speak. I will say that I think it's important to fill the vacancies on the planning board. I think that's worthwhile. I think having 4 people in one of those meetings is a risk. So I'm fully supportive of us deliberating and trying to arrive at consensus. And whoever doesn't get nominated this round, they've either applied to other positions or I hope they keep their name in the hat for other things, opportunities that will come up.
Yeah, I agree with much of what John has said. I don't know Mr. Doherty, so I can't really comment about him. I know of Mr. Hebert's service on the ZBA. My experience with Leroy Crockett is also very similar. I recall him as observed him on various committees. We ran in the same election that he did, that John referenced. So he's clearly committed. I think he was he's already on another committee. or just was, just pending appointment to that. So, which is one that we don't think is going to be that demanding. So he's certainly qualified. Noah Perlet, I've seen him and attended a number of Conservation Commission meetings, and I find him to be very articulate and he's very good report from the chair of that committee. So, we have sort of like the abundance of good candidates. Gwen Simons also was recently recommended to be appointed. So very, very solid candidates, with Mr. Johnson just sort of like, wanting to sign back in again after just having completed what I think was a very, very distinguished tour of duty as a counselor who made many, many contributions, in the area of communications and others. And I know he was the planning board liaison for a long stretch of time. So, but I believe that that Crockett and Hebert are Crockett, Hebert, and Perlet are qualified. They're the top candidates.
Top candidates.
Yep.
So you listed your top
Sure.
three first after,
Sorry.
you listed your top three first after shooting me down.
So
Thank you. That is super helpful. I know everyone on this list except for Mr. Doherty. So with that being said, Mr. Doherty, I think we'll talk about him under Zoning Board of Appeals, maybe more appropriately when we get to that.
I thought that was a good fit there as well.
We'll get into that. I nominated James Hebert as the chair of the zoning board. James always attended all the trainings. So did Leroy, James is actually an engineer. So I'm sure that's what his resume says and everything like that. And so I think, he works for an engineering firm, and I think the part of the planning process is part of his job. So I think that background is very helpful and could be very keeping them, on task and not, getting sidetracked sometimes, which I know we all do on those boards. I was guilty of it as well. I personally think Noah would be great. Noah Perlot. I apologize. That one is, coming from the Conservation Commission, it was only this year that I learned that the Conservation Commission, part of their charge is to, be in line with the planning board, or at least, have a hand in or see what they're doing and things like that. And I don't know if there's anyone right now that really has that background. I don't think there's anyone serving any of these committees right now that has such the environmental background. I think he would be a really great addition and really change the conversations there with them. Just, we say it, I think it's good to have a variety of different people, not a board full of all one thing, and have a different perspective. So I support Noah. I think James Hebert would be really good because he was the chair for the last 2 years. He served in the ZBA. I also think, that Leroy has served for years, and I know that he could take the capacity to do what planning board is. For me, it really comes down to, what we're looking for maybe, or what people think. Really, we have all a bunch of really good applications. And I just want to say, I did meet Gwen Simons last week. She is really motivated to get involved. So I just want to mention her name again and say, let's not forget about her, because I think I was kind of bummed when I said to her, you didn't apply to zoning board? Because, I know there's other places she could be, but I think, so that's how I'm feeling right now. So.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'll offer a motion, because I sense that we're in alignment on this, but I'd like to motion to appoint Noah Perlet as a first alternate to the planning board.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
So now the tough part.
Yeah.
I mean, not tough part, because they're all great choices.
It is.
So I think it comes down then between Leroy Crockett and the other candidates we mentioned, Hebert. I think are the top two. What I would say is I believe Hebert probably has the most applicable direct experience for the planning board, given his zoning board of appeals experience. The ZBA is a tough one. I mean, it's they have a very busy agenda like the planning board. There are winners and losers, you know, at the Board of Appeals. We've had a lot of personal experience with ZBA, been there 3 times and we're finally approved the 3rd time and told not to come back. So I mean, it's a tough job. You have to make some tough calls, but I observed him and I think he's well qualified, certainly to be a second alternate. So I'm going to make a motion to that effect for Mr. Hebert as the candidate for the appointment to the planning board as second alternate.
I will second that. And I'd like to entertain discussion if that's okay. Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm seconding that because that's where I feel like the committee is aligning. My number 2, but this is because of where my knowledge gaps are, would have been Ken Johnson. We worked together closely for the past year. Brings a perspective that I think is missing on the planning board as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, but I'm supportive of moving James forward. I think he would be an excellent candidate as well.
And I'm going to build on that comment about Ken Johnson. I've not had the chance to talk to him about this. I don't know. I was surprised to see him apply for this. I wouldn't really expect him to be signing up so soon. But I echo the things that John said about Ken. He was, dialed in and certainly is qualified. But at this point, I believe these other 2 candidates are qualified and perhaps slightly better qualified than Ken. That's and Ken, I'll call you and we'll talk. So.
Okay, so are we all in favor?
Yes.
So as I mentioned, we had a resignation from the zoning board. So Rudy Karen, I believe, correct, is the one that resigned. And so what we were looking at, if I'm going to go through this, is because at the last meeting last week, we made some changes to zoning board. So we're going to be, I guess, making some more changes. And so let's make sure I'm going through this correctly. Last week, we took Michelle Stevenson and we moved her to a full voting member, so that does not change. So what we're going to be doing today is currently Richard Silkman is the first alternate. And what I'm proposing is to move Richard up to a voting member. And then at the meeting last week, what we did was we appointed Kyle Noonan to be the second alternate. And so what I'm proposing tonight is to move Kyle up to the first alternate position. So then really what we're discussing tonight is the second alternate position for the zoning board. And again, we have a great set of applications. I did get a very brief chance to send the applications over to the current chair, who is James Hebert, and asked him to take a quick peek. He did. He said that, tell you what he said. So I want to be accurate. That, that he thinks Joe Doherty would have a good sense of the role, having recently been on the other side of it as an applicant. So I just kind of wanted to share that feedback because I think just because also I've served on zoning board for so long and I know who they are, and I actually think I struggle. We have 2 really good applications for very different reasons, I think. We have applications for Joseph Doherty and then from Marvin Gates. So after all that, would anyone like to offer their feedback about, and it's just those 2 applications, right?
To my knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I mixed up my thoughts.
So I can start. I think we talked about Joseph a little bit at planning board. I think this is a more logical fit. Doesn't sit on a committee currently, is actively looking to get engaged. Again, recently moved, not recently, he's been in the area for a
Right.
while, but recently went through the zoning board of appeals process to do some work on his house to make it a year-round home. Marvin Gates, I've had numerous interactions with. He serves on long-range planning, serves on coastal water and harbor committee. very engaged citizen, shows up to a lot of town council meetings as well. I'm sure would fill the role as a ZBA member quite nicely as
Mhm.
well. So I don't want to jump to nominations before Councilor Hamels had a.
I would like to speak. Mr. Doherty, we've discussed him previously. I do not know him. I can't really speak to him. I do know Marvin Gates. He was appointed to the Long Range Planning Committee, and I have been attending a fair number of those along with Jean Marie Caterina, who's the liaison, the town council liaison. So he definitely is a contributor on long range planning, and he's an alternate on coastal waters and harbor committee. So he's definitely got bandwidth. He's a thoughtful guy. He's a workhorse, and he would be a credit to this committee. And I think he is also very balanced and able to make tough calls on things in a very collaborative, in a very good way.
Okay. I recall Marvin coming before zoning board years ago
For his place.
for his art
Right.
studio. I just remember him, and I do think going through the process, I think as we said before, is definitely helpful. And they've both been through the process. I think the only thing I will say is, Marvin already currently serves on 2 committees. And so, we have someone new who wants to get involved, who's been through the process. And I think that seems like an appropriate time to bring Mr. Doherty on. And it seems like an appropriate place, considering this is kind of his introduction. I actually know that other people have been pulled into ZBA because they had to go through the ZBA process. So I think with that being said, as much respect as I have for Marvin, and I continue to, and I think he would be a good member, I think it would be good to bring someone new on, have some fresh blood, have a different perspective. And, someone, and he lives down on Jones Creek, which is, he's familiar with I think a lot of the stuff they see is the rising seas and tides and things like that. And so, he's living in that world. So I think I would nominate Mr. Joseph Doherty.
Second that.
I don't know if there's a discussion. All in favor?
Madam Chair, can I, your motion actually has 3 parts to it. as
Oh,
I
you're right.
understand.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I just wanted to-
Yes, no, you're totally right. Thank you. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna start over and I'm gonna craft a new motion. And the new motion is going to be for the zoning board of appeals is to move Richard Silkman up to a full voting position. Move Kyle Noonan to the first alternate position. And then nominate Joseph Doherty as the second alternate.
And I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank you. That's better. Okay. So now we have to set the agenda for our next meeting, and I, again, apologize that we can't say. I should hopefully know next week when we can meet next month. We had a brief discussion about, I think, procedure. Let me try to summarize some of the ideas that I had about, I think generally what the consensus was in the conversations we were having is there's a lot more interest now than there was even 5 years ago. I know, before it wasn't a competitive process, and now it does seem to be, we're looking at a lot of really good applications, and we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence and giving everyone their right chance. So one of the thoughts I had for the January meeting, and I could use some help on articulating this, is just to how to move forward. So we feel like all the residents are getting their chance, they feel like their applications are being seen, and that we're doing everything the way that we think we should, above board and following procedures. I know we've had a lot of questions about the use of executive sessions. This is all in my understanding, very new territory for this committee. And so I could use your guys' help right now to maybe try to craft exactly how to word that on our agenda for next month to discuss our procedures.
Norms and,
Norms.
yeah.
I'm not sure we
How we
wanna-
plan to work as a committee. how you word that, I don't know, we've got some time before you publish the next agenda. So,
Okay.
but I'm
Okay.
aligned. I mean, in terms of, I think that's a good focus area
Mhm.
is let's just establish the ground rules. I mean, me and you
Yeah.
are both new. Don's been doing it a while and catch us up and we might challenge some of the norms that have been used in the past, but
Yep.
let's at least agree as a committee how we're going to proceed for this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, it's clear that we had committed to review our procedures and to see areas where we could improve and how we can kind of address questions that will very likely arise and that may have arisen already. And there's some work that's been done already. I don't think that I can't give you a timeline in terms of when it's going to be ready, but it does seem that we have a chance to pick up on that again, in January and begin to try to figure out a way to confirm some processes and probably the fact something. So I'm open to have that conversation, and I think that it's a new rule. I mean, I think it's really a new world if you compare where we are today versus where we were 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, the world has changed, COVID and Zoom and a lot of other things have happened. So we're in a totally different place. So, and I know the town manager and the assistant town manager are gathering information and feedback. So we'll have that hopefully to rely on and to build on. And we made that commitment when we addressed this town council recently.
And I think one thing that's important, and we may need to communicate, is if your term, just because your term expires in 2022, doesn't mean you're done December 31st. The way our rules read is you serve until your successor has been
Mhm.
named. So there might be some confusion out there if these don't get out. I don't know who would typically do that type of communication, but I think I just wanted to put that out there that you're not off the hook
Right.
at the end of the year.
You
You
leave
can't
that-
run or hide.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and so I mean, I would imagine if any vacancies or anything come up, that's the sort of stuff that would just get placed on the agenda as those
Yeah.
things flow in.
Hmm.
Okay,
So, but I'd like to make a recommendation that as specific agenda item, we didn't confirm this, but we get a report out on potential improvement areas at the next meeting in terms of process and other issues that have been raised, including confidentiality.
Staff is pleased to work with council, with committee chair in distilling that down to agenda items, if you will. But yeah, we'll be in a position to provide some recommendation and some best practice material from other communities. That's helpful.
Thank you.
that would be great. Okay. I don't know if there was anything else that anyone had.
Oh, good job.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Chair,
Yes,
do you have an opportunity for statements?
there is no public comment in the meeting tonight on the agenda.
I'm requesting comment.
Okay,
Thank you.
And again, I'm commenting more as a fellow council member than a member of the public.
and this is
And
planning and zoning board.
exactly. And I guess my first question and the thing that is up in the air that's of concern to me is what's your plan for the seats terming out? For filling them? I mean, are you putting them on a future appointments agenda or what's going on? Because you've got these people who are like,
Yeah, no, and we were hoping to be able to address those issues tonight, but unfortunately we were unable to, and so that's why we
So
have to
what-
wait until January.
so what are you doing? Do you know
With what?
what I just asked you?
So
Plan for
I think
filling.
the first
those-
agenda will
Yeah.
be talking about what our plan is going to be.
Okay, so it's gonna be part of the
Yeah,
norms
so you're
thing?
Totally right. That is totally part of our agenda for January, unless for
Okay.
some reason the next month we can't figure this out. I don't want to misspeak, but I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Dealing with this.
Oh, yeah, no, but I just know that, as a member of the
Yeah.
town council, it's like,
No, that's a really good point. That totally should have been on the agenda.
okay.
Thank you.
And then I'm glad to hear you guys are gonna discuss norms. Part of why I'm here tonight, as you know, is rules and policies. The
Mhm.
chair reached out to ask me as chair of rules and policies to
Mhm.
maybe we need to start looking at
Yeah.
not just this committee, but other committees as far as, what are the norms and how we gonna operate. So, I just wanted to bring that up. And then the very last thing I wanted, and I know this is nothing you guys haven't heard from me, is I was very concerned with the last meeting and some statements that were made about people that were not true. And I really feel very strongly that the record needs to be corrected and the record needs to be corrected publicly. So I'm just putting that out there and asking what your plan is for that.
I believe we're still waiting for advice
From
on how to proceed.
whom?
Legal,
Okay,
I guess I would.
okay.
Like.
I just wanted that, put that out there because I'm not letting that one go, okay? Just so you know. And that's it. Thank you.
Are we all set? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.